It didn't buzz, just blinked once, like it was trying not to wake me. Executive sync. Required. I clicked before thinking. The calendar loaded. My name wasn't there. I refreshed, checked filters, switched views, still blank. The attachment opened slowly, as if it already knew. A reorganized structure chart, polished and minimal, each position filled. Until mine. Under Director Client Experience, one word in parentheses. Vacant, not interim. Not restructured, just gone. A message lit up the corner of my screen. Sorry that invite wasn't meant for you. No punctuation. No greeting. No name. But I didn't need one. The last time Barbara sent a message, she asked if I could make my emails less narrative. She said, clients wanted clarity, not character. Now she wanted absence. I kept still, both hands flat on the desk, not touching anything. My mug sat beside the keyboard, white porcelain, thin crack along the handle. Dad gave it to me this day I signed the permanent contract. Looks delicate, he'd murmured, but strong. The epoxy seam had held through 4 winters, 2 promotions, and 1 office relocation. I stared at the word again. Vacant. Last week. I reviewed client feedback reports. Eleanor Fairchild's thank you note was folded between pages, handwritten, slanted right. Claire remembered my son's name when no one else did. I hadn't filed it yet. A second ping came through. We've realigned client ops, streamlining top-down redundancies. No greeting, no signature, just a sentence that erased 12 years of memory like chalk. I scrolled up, searched my name in the org doc. Nothing. I hovered the mouse over the old line that used to hold my initials. The cursor flickered, but didn't click. I didn't let it. Barbara once told me over lunch that leadership is about making people replaceable, not indispensable. I had nodded not because I agreed, but because the salt on my salad had stuck in my throat. I lifted the mug. The crack along the handle had darkened where the tea once seeped in. I turned it in my hand gently, like holding someone else's story. It felt lighter than I remembered. I didn't reply to her message. I didn't forward the org chart. I just stared at the empty space and thought, if something is missing and no one mentions it, maybe they wanted it gone all along. I thought if I kept my voice even and my notes straight, there would be a place for me. On my first day at Pemberton, I wrote 7 thank you cards by hand. No script, no company letterhead. Just my own sentences, quiet and specific. I used a fountain pen I hadn't touched since college. The ink skipped once on the word reliable. I didn't correct it. I stayed late that week inputting client preferences manually. Decaf or dark roast morning calls or afternoons grandmother's names, cancelled vacations, postponed surgeries. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. I didn't know it would matter. Barbara glanced at one of my logs during a weekly review. You spent 42 minutes on a client with no active proposal. She closed the folder without waiting for a response. I adjusted, spoke faster, rehearsed answers that sounded less human. When we presented quarterly results, I always let Derek lead with graphs. I folded my hands, nodded when expected. I waited for eye contact before speaking if it came at all. Once after I followed up on a client's mother's recovery from a stroke, Barbara left a note in the margin of my report. This isn't counselling. I taped it to the back of a drawer. Not as a warning. Just to remember how things were phrased. In one meeting during a discussion on retention strategy, I mentioned how Maggie preferred written updates to phone calls. Gordon looked past me and asked if the insight was from a formal survey. I didn't answer. Barbara answered for me. Claire's approach is more interpretive. Nobody laughed. Nobody defended. I started wearing muted colours. Taupe, slate. The lavender blouse I liked stayed in the closet for 2 seasons. Too bright, too much. Once, when I wore it on a Friday, Olivia looked at me and said, "Someone's feeling bold." I switched back to navy the next week. The notebook I kept was leather-bound, a gift from a friend long gone. Inside lists, moments, fragments, never shown, never shared. When Barbara asked for my workflow breakdown, I rewrote everything in Arial bullet points color-coded. That version lived on the server. The original stayed on my shelf. I never missed a birthday on the team. Never spoke over anyone. Never left without cleaning the whiteboard, even when I hadn't written on it. I believed if I became necessary in the smallest ways, someone would eventually say, "She belongs here." They never said it. But I kept trying, even when it felt like folding a letter no one had asked for. I used to think being overlooked was a kind of safety. When the holiday basket from Eleanor Fairchild arrived, the card had names written in silver ink: Barbara, Derek, Olivia, even Rachel. I turned the envelope over twice before realizing it was never meant for me. During the winter press release, Pemberton was praised for retaining the Hutchins contract, $1 million renewal. Barbara gave the interview. "We credit strong systems and measurable trust," she said. I wasn't mentioned. My initials had been in every follow-up, every service call, every revision sent late into a Thursday night. Still, I wasn't mentioned. In the quarterly meeting, Gordon stood beneath the projector and said, "Client trust is our strength." He turned to Barbara, nodded once. I sat 2 chairs away. My name wasn't spoken. My title wasn't listed. The brown folder on my shelf held all the printed notes I didn't upload to the system. I labeled each page by hand. Maggie's preferred contact times. Harold's back order delays. Walter's dog's recovery timeline. Not secrets, just things that didn't fit in the template. No one ever asked to see it. Barbara once walked past my desk, glanced at the folder's spine and said, "Still keeping your diary?" I didn't answer. The folder stayed where it was, slightly frayed at the corners. A paperclip on the top edge held a post-it note from Eleanor. "Thank you for remembering my daughter's recital." It was written in blue gel pen, the kind that leaves a faint smudge if pressed too hard. I used to wonder if the smudge was a mistake or a signature. At the office birthday celebration, Olivia passed out slices of cake. She skipped me, said there were only enough for the core team. I folded my napkin and placed it under my cup. Once at a client dinner, I offered to take the early train back so others could stay. Barbara didn't look up from her wine glass. That's probably for the best. No one objected. The folder hasn't moved. I never open it unless I have to prove something. Lately, there's been nothing to prove. The voice in my head used to whisper, "As long as you're useful, they'll need you." Now it barely speaks. And when it does, the sentence doesn't finish. I used to believe that if something was carefully built, it couldn't be undone in a moment. Barbara stood at the front of the room, her tablet propped against the podium, like it had something important to say. Today we'll be reviewing current inefficiencies in client engagement. No one looked at me, but the projector screen behind her filled with my audit, 53 pages indexed and time-stamped, every line traced back to a name and a choice, and a voice on the other end of a call. She scrolled without urgency. "Let's begin with this." She tapped a line near the top. "Followed up Hutchins family pet mobility improved after injections." She turned back toward the room. "This is what we've been using to measure retention." No one spoke. The air inside the conference room felt too deliberate. She kept scrolling. Resent Maggie's mother's gingerbread recipe after inbox error. She replied, made my week. Then her voice flattened. This isn't strategy. This is emotional clutter. I watched the cursor hover above the file name. Beginning today, we'll return to standardized professional protocols. This... Her hand moved slightly. Is not aligned. She clicked. The screen flashed. The file disappeared. No warning prompt. No archive. Derek shifted in his chair. Rachel looked down at her notepad. My hand was still resting on the highlighter I'd brought out of habit. Blue ink. I used it for anything human. Barbara didn't glance back. These deviations undermine the brand. Personal sentiments dilute authority. Clients are not friends, they're accounts. She returned to the agenda, moved on to the next slide. I couldn't remember what it was about. No one said my name. The room smelled faintly of dry markers and peppermint gum. Someone's pen tapped twice against the table and stopped. No one looked at me. Not even Barbara. The blue highlighter left a soft mark on my palm from how tightly I'd been holding it. I turned it over once, capped it, and set it beside my notes. They were just bullet points now. Nothing underneath. A year's worth of trust pressed delete in front of 23 witnesses. I waited for the silence to break. It didn't. It's strange the way something disappears while you're still holding the shape of it. Some exits don't require a door. Barbara's voice lingered longer than her slides. She called it realignment through uniformity. The room nodded in sequence like a metronome someone else had set. I stood when she asked for final thoughts. Before we move on, I said I have something brief. No one shifted. No one reached for a pen. I'll be stepping down effective immediately. Hostility in public spaces qualifies under the exit clause. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. Barbara blinked, not surprised, just mildly inconvenienced. You can't resign in the middle of a review, she replied. I didn't respond. Gordon adjusted his posture from the back row. Perhaps we take this offline. Give the team a moment. I turned toward the table, picked up the porcelain mug I'd stopped using weeks ago. The glaze had chipped just beneath the rim, leaving a raw edge. I never reported it to facilities. It felt appropriate. I placed it at the center of the table. No one asked why. Barbara folded her hands. You're reacting. This isn't a career move. This is a bruise. I looked at the screen behind her, blank now. No slides, just light. Rachel stared at the floor. Derek checked his watch. Olivia tapped something in her notes without pressing save. No one stood. No one asked if I was sure. I didn't expect them to. Walking out didn't feel like a decision. It felt like finishing a sentence no one else could read. At home, I opened the internal dashboard, disabled my credentials, cleared device links. The red confirmation buttons appeared one by one. Are you sure this action cannot be undone? I clicked without hovering. The final tab was the shared drive. My name floated beside folders I'd built, color-coded by season initials and trust. I didn't download a copy. I didn't need to. Barbara once told me during a team debrief, people remember what serves them. The rest fades. She was right in her own way. The sound of each revoked permission echoed like glass being set down too hard, not broken, just noticed. The mug stayed on that table. Still whole, still flawed. Some things don't need to follow you out the door to prove they were never meant to be carried home. I still woke at 7:30 the way muscle remembers obligation long after it's gone. The kettle on my new desk was stainless steel, slightly dented near the spout. It didn't whistle, just breathed when the water reached boil. I liked that. I didn't need anything to call for me. The office was smaller. No frosted glass, no wall-mounted accolades. The desk had a scratch near the edge where someone once dragged a laptop too quickly. I ran my fingers along it like a fault line. It didn't matter. No one cared what color sticky notes I used or how long a conversation lasted. There was no formal orientation, just a handshake, a quiet nod, and space. The first message came from Walter. His name blinked twice on my screen before I opened it. "I heard you moved. I want to know what your new place believes in." I stared at the blinking cursor before typing. "We believe people are not files," he replied with a photo his dog curled beside a patio chair. "No limp anymore. Thought you'd want to know." I pinned it to the bottom corner of my screen. Not for reference, just to remember the quiet part of the work. When I walked to the break area, someone had left a bowl of plums, no labels, no note. I took one, wiped it on the hem of my sleeve. The fabric still smelled faintly of old printer toner and lavender detergent. There were no strategy decks waiting in my inbox. No performance matrix tagged with my name. Just a folder marked Explore and a shared doc titled What Do You Notice? I spent an hour reading through client comments. They were messy, personal, or strange. Remembers my daughter's braces, sent handwritten condolences, told me to go home early. I didn't sort them. I just let them sit open beside my tea. I found the brown folder at the bottom of my bag. The spine had softened with travel. I flipped through the first few pages, then closed it. No need to reread. I knew the order. I placed it in the drawer not as proof, not as shield. Just a map of where I'd once stood. Some things aren't meant to guide you forward, but they still deserve to be kept. I didn't answer right away when the call came. The name on the screen was familiar, but not warm. Susan's voice arrived without pause. "Barbara would like to know if you'd consider sharing your old client tracking methods for internal realignment." There was no greeting, no acknowledgement of anything beyond the task. Just a sentence dressed like a favor. I said I'd think about it, though we both knew I wouldn't. 15 minutes later, a message blinked from Rachel. "Everyone's been asking where your files are. No punctuation, no softness." I read it 3 times before setting my phone face down. That afternoon, Frank Dobson from Finance left a voicemail. "If there's any way you could help us reconstruct the client history, just the framework would be a big help." His tone was more careful than Susan's, but the shape of the request was the same. I didn't return the call. The envelope came the next morning. No company header, no handwritten note, just thick white stock, sealed clean with my name printed in the center. Inside an offer. Consultancy, flexible terms, short-term engagement, to support continuity in client experience during transition. Barbara's name wasn't on it. There was a line about collaboration, a line about opportunity. Nothing about what had happened. Nothing about what had been erased. I placed the envelope on the window ledge, where the light fell strongest in the late afternoon. It curled slightly at the corner. I didn't press it down. Matthew passed by on his way out for coffee. "You're quieter than usual." I nodded. There was nothing to say. Later that evening, I found the lavender scarf I used to wear on days I had client presentations. It still smelled faintly like lemon balm. I folded it twice and tucked it back into the drawer. I hadn't needed it in weeks. Barbara once told me offhand, "They'll come to you when something breaks." Don't mistake that for importance. She wasn't wrong. I turned the envelope over again, then let it sit. The edge of it caught the sun like something trying to disappear. There are moments when a door opens that you know you won't walk through, not out of pride, but because you remember how small the room really was. I still wake early, but I no longer measure my worth by how quickly I log in. The cactus near my window leans toward the light. I turn it each morning to keep it balanced. It doesn't flower. It doesn't need to. I bought it the day I accepted the offer from Marlowe, something alive that asks for very little and stays. I keep a notebook open beside my keyboard. No template, no formatting, just names and details. This morning I added one beneath Harold Yates' Anna, literature major, UMass. He didn't tell me outright. I caught it in the way his voice lifted when her name came up and how he paused as if afraid someone might interrupt it. During the meeting, Matthew Corbin leaned against the edge of the whiteboard. You bring something we didn't know how to design trust. The room didn't pause. No one clapped or quoted him. He moved on as if the sentence had been a memo only I was meant to hear. I didn't respond. I underlined a note in the margin of a client file. Constance. Prefers early calls. Mention anniversary. The boardroom windows overlooked a parking lot. I watched someone drop their coffee bin to pick it up and laugh at themselves. Nothing dramatic. Just something real. At my desk, I opened the bottom drawer and found the photograph from Pemberton, the holiday luncheon, the one where everyone smiled too tightly. I flipped it over. On the back in block letters, to Claire. Good luck, always. Tom. It was the only note I ever received with my name on it from that office. Not because I was forgotten, because I was never meant to be seen. I kept the back of the photo and slid it between the pages of an old folder. Not as proof. Just to mark the fact that I had once stayed long enough for someone to say goodbye. Barbara once told the team, trust is earned by repetition, not relationship. I used to write that down in the margins, then erase it later. Now, I don't carry erasers. My clients don't ask for strategy decks. They ask to be remembered. Their son's recital, their broken wrist, the lemon scones that never turned out right. I give them what they ask for, and I don't ask if it's enough. I know it is. I used to think leaving something unfinished meant it might return on its own. Now I know better. The envelope was heavier than necessary. Inside 3 pages, embossed letterhead, my full name spelled in bold at the top. A title I never asked for, printed twice. The language was polished, practiced, precise. We'd like to welcome you back, Director of Client Experience, with full strategic control. There was no mention of what had been undone. No line about the file. No name of the person who deleted it. A sentence near the end read, We believe you are uniquely positioned to restore what's been lost. I printed the offer, folded it once, then again. No red pen, no reply. I slid it into a soft beige envelope, the kind used for resumes, not regrets. I didn't seal it at first. Just wrote in the center, in small handwriting, no thank you. It sat on my desk for 4 days untouched. I moved it only to dust beneath it. On the 5th day I asked Wesley to deliver it through internal courier. No digital trail, I said. He didn't ask questions. When I returned to my desk, I opened the archive folder marked Pemberton. Legacy. Inside performance dashboards, retention logs, edited drafts of things no one read. 12 files I once thought proved something. I deleted them all. No backup. No hesitation. Barbara once stood in front of a room and said, Don't mistake silence for consent. It usually just means someone gave up explaining. She was wrong about that. I opened a blank document. No formatting. No header. I named it Client Threads, Volume 1. It didn't need an audience. Just a beginning. The black pen beside my keyboard had leaked slightly. A ring of ink circled its base like a watermark no one asked for. I didn't wipe it off. I reached for the envelope again, now empty, pressed it flat with my palm, and slid it into the bottom drawer. Not as proof, just to remember I had declined. No announcement, no warning shot, no demand to be seen. Some closures don't echo. They just end. And when they do, the quiet doesn't ask for applause. It just waits for you to stop needing the door. I've stopped filling things all the way to the top. The kettle clicks once when it settles on the burner. I don't rush the flame. The jar of Earl Grey leaves is nearly empty now, just enough for one last cup. I don't add it to the grocery list. Not everything needs replacing. The light from the window moves across the floor without asking anything of me. There are no pings, no calendar reminders, no CCs from people who mistake presents for permission. While the water heats, I sort through old notes folded into uneven thirds. Not files, just fragments. Broderick prefers unlined pages, doesn't number his chapters. Maggie listens to Jazz Mondays, calls it her reset. I don't need them anymore, but I don't throw them away. I gather the pages, tie them with a thin red string, and slide them into a paper box with a wave pattern printed in faded blue. It's not for archiving, it's for remembering what doesn't require access. The steam rises slowly. I pour into a ceramic cup with a chipped rim I've never bothered to replace. It holds just enough. The phone buzzes once, a number I don't recognize. I don't move toward it. The call ends without insistence. A text follows. Ms. Whitman, we're exploring Relationship First Consultancy. May we talk? I don't respond. The cup is warm at the base. I hold it with both hands steady. The scent of bergamot and something softer, maybe memory, rises and fades. Across the room, a notebook sits unopened, spine still tight. I don't reach for it. Barbara once told a room of interns, if no one sees you succeed, it doesn't count. I remember how her voice didn't waver, how not one person corrected her. There's no one to correct me now. The breeze moves through the cracked window, brushing past the curtain edge like it knows it won't be stopped. On the table, no contracts, no revenue projections, no sign-offs. Just a sprig of dried lavender laid across the center of a closed notebook. Not pressed, not posed, simply there. I don't open it. I don't need to write what I already know.